A thief and his unlikely allies are tasked with finding and returning a lost relic. But then, as you might expect, things go off the rails. The rich fantasy world of the cherished classic role-playing game gets the surprising treatment of both thrills and laughs. Wes gathers his bag of holding and +1 mace on his quest to bring you his review of Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves on View the Right Thing.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hey, welcome to a teeny tiny mini microscopic episode of View the Right Thing. I know that probably would have been more appropriate for Ant-Man, but instead we're doing Dungeons & Dragons. We've had some technical difficulties, so this is going to be short and sweet, but, you know, we talked about just not doing one altogether, but we figured put something out is better than not putting anything out. So here we go. So I went to see Dungeons & Dragons with Alexis, and we both really just enjoyed the movie. We thought it was really fun. We thought it was really exciting. Here's a quick little synopsis of the film. It stars Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Regé Jean Page, Justice Smith, Sophia Lillis, Hugh Grant. It's directed by John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, who did Freaks and Geeks back in the day. And here is the synopsis. A charming thief and a band of unlikely adventurers embark on an epic quest to retrieve a lost relic, but things go dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people. The movie is silly and fun and really captures a lot of the elements of not just the D&D plots, but sort of the joy of playing the game itself. There were a lot of references, obvious things like, they mentioned Neverwinter and the Underdark, and there's a dragon that's from the game. And I think the prison that is featured in the movie briefly is also an established, lore location that D&D players would recognize. But then they also captured, elements of actually playing. So a couple of things that stood out to me, and I'm going to try and keep this pretty spoiler free if possible. There's an item that has a very specific range of how far it can work. It can work up to X number of yards. And there's multiple times in the film they actually have this discussion. How far does this work? Can you remind me? So they make a point of pointing that out, which is something that happens so much, every week in a D&D game. Somebody says, I'm going to use this thing, and then either the DM or somebody else is like, oh yeah, okay, well, how far does that go? Okay, well then I'm going to make it go to here. So having that discussion in the movie felt very, very familiar to me. It was a lot of fun. Another thing that I noticed that I really liked, in Dungeons and Dragons, when you roll, you say, oh, I'm going to shoot an arrow. That's in this scenario. This is what they discuss in the movie. I'm going to shoot an arrow, and then they say, okay, well, roll your dice to see how good you shot your arrow, basically. And you roll a 20-sided dice, and if you roll a 20, that's the best you could possibly roll. And so that's a critical hit. And so, it's like the perfect shot, amazing things happen, maybe you get a bonus, who knows. But if you, on the opposite end of that, if you roll a nat 1, then that's a critical failure, and something terrible will happen. And in the film, they discuss, oh, well, we shoot an arrow into this room, and they're like, well, what if we hit this person, then they're dead? And I was like, oh, they're explaining what the crit failure is in this film. So I thought that was really smart, and it brought, as a player, it brought a lot of joy to me. Now, I'm not the most savvy D&D player, I've played for a few years, but I still kind of consider myself new because I have to ask a lot of questions and get reminded of things quite a bit. But it felt really good as a player to see those things. Alexis had mentioned when I discussed it with her that she's never played D&D, and she really enjoyed the movie. And that was, I think, one of those questions that I had was, will somebody who's never played D&D like this film? And what the conclusion we kind of came to was, if you are a person who liked a movie like, say, Guardians of the Galaxy, that's basically what this movie is. This movie is Guardians of the Galaxy, except instead of space, it's this fantasy realm. It's got that same kind of vibe. It's got, the charming kind of ruffian character, who's sort of the leader. And then you have like a strong, not silent type woman, but like she's like real badass and can fight. You've got, a bumbling sidekick, a not so bumbling sidekick. So yeah, and it's about stealing objects and righting wrongs. So it's very much a Guardians of the Galaxy kind of movie. And it's kind of up there with that film and quality. Some of the CG isn't amazing, but the story itself is pretty great. There is one other thing I want to point out. Desiree also went and saw this movie with us, and she made a good point that I didn't think about initially, but she's 100% right. And one other element from playing Dungeons and Dragons that I think they worked in really well is, you have a dungeon master who is guiding you through this thing, and they play all of these, like, what we consider NPCs. And so, you might go to a tavern to get information, and you have to talk to the barkeep, and so your DM will play out that role for you. And a lot of these characters, they're there for information, or to give you something, and then you don't necessarily hear from them again, or you don't hear from them for a long time. But every once in a while, you have an important character to your journey who goes along with the group, who fights alongside you and has to take roles and all that stuff. And that person is usually played by the DM, kind of gets them into the game as well. And that character often is extremely knowledgeable, has more, knowledge than they should. They are usually very good fighters. They have high stats. They're kind of perfect in so many ways. And there is a character in the film who sort of embodies that. And it was really neat to kind of see them work in this thing that you encounter when you play the game into the film in a very kind of natural, fun way that I didn't think was too distracting. But yeah, it was quite the little journey. There's a great cameo. I won't spoil. There's a fat dragon, which we love, who's also, I believe, in the lore of D&D, sort of D&D canon. Trying to think if there's any other like really amazing things to talk about. I just don't want to spoil the movie. Hugh Grant's a lot of fun. He usually is. I love the two young people who are not really newcomers, but they're still pretty young and early in their careers. Justice Smith, who I really love. If you haven't seen The Get Down on Netflix, it's a shame they canceled that show. He's fantastic in that. He was also in Detective Pikachu. He was in the last couple Jurassic World movies. He's really, really talented. And it's I like every time I see him in something, I'm like, oh, cool, Justice Smith is in this. And then the other person who I haven't seen a ton of, but Sophia Lillis, who was in Everything Is Not Okay, that show. And then probably a lot of people know her from It. She played Beverly, or Bevy from the Levee, in It, chapters 1 and 2. And she's fantastic in all these things. She's really engaging in this, and it's easy to root for her character, because she's sort of she sort of plays a straight character, like the straight man kind of role, where a lot of like nonsense is going on around them, and they just sort of react as we might, and there's some really fun surprises with her character as well that I won't get into and spoil. But overall, we really like this movie. We recommend this pretty much for everyone. I mentioned to my mom that we had seen this, and she was like, "Oh, it's not. I don't think that's my cup of tea." And I said, "Well, you might be surprised. I think they did a good job of trying to open up the world of D&D to larger audiences and get people excited about the world. So much so, actually, that when discussing this with Alexis, she said, "You know what? I think I kind of want to try playing D&D." And I can't think of a better endorsement for a film based on a game, especially if it makes you want to play the game. So this is the short mini review. Appreciate you listening. Have have a great time at the movies. We'll see you next time. Bon cinema.